Hi, in this single tutorial I'll explain to you how to make this cool looking gas giant planet, and it's going to be a single tutorial, so keep up the pace. Let's just dive right in, and here we got an empty canvas, an empty scene, and I'll put in a sphere and just crank up the subdivisions. Now, the first thing you need to know is that we're going to make multiple materials and actually put one on top of the other using alpha channels. But first of all, we're going to start with the base channel, and I'm just going to flick it on. And I got reflectance here. I'll take care of reflectance first because I don't need a fancy highlight. I need a very washed out highlight. So first of all, the strength should be a little bit more, and the width should be all the way up to 100. And I can actually change the color according to what color. I'm going to make that orangey stuff, so I'm just gonna use kind of an orangey color to be the specular color. Now let's dive into the color channel. First of all, I want to use a very simple texture called tiles. It's underneath surfaces, and I'll just pick lines, and I'll just make these three complete white. It doesn't really matter how. Okay, just make it utterly white. And I'm gonna make the grout width very tiny and the bevel fairly big, so 100 should do it. This is the base for all those bands across my planet. I can actually crank this up to 120, a little bit less bands, maybe 200, something like that. Let's keep it at 100. I can maybe change it later. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to distort these tiles. So I'm going to add an effect called a distorter. And this distorter, I'm going to add this to my distorter channel, and that's going to be a noise. And it's going to be, I always snap it to the world, and it's going to be turbulence, and it's going to be way bigger, 300, and it's going to be more of a contrast in it, something like this. Well, hang on, I need to crank up the black stuff, something like that. Keep this at 0. Maybe just keep the contrast up a little bit, like 15%. So 44, 63, 15 is low clip, high clip, and contrast. So this is going to warp my my bands, and as you can see, it's quite a lot. So I'm actually going to put this down, the amount, to 40. That looks okay. That looks all right. And I'm actually going to put these tiles again in a distorter just to give them a little bit more of a cloudy feel to it. So here we go. I'm going to put it in another distorter, and this time I'm going to use the noise, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be noxious. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, if you want to have it animated, fine. The animation speed from 0 to 1, so goes from 0 to 1. That's a regular speed. So I'm just going to put it at 0.2, and you can actually put a loop period on it. So let's say 10 seconds. Now I can actually, if I right click on the icon, I can animate it and I can see what it does, and it's really slow. If I crank it up to 1, you start seeing things happening. So just put it to 0, 3. Switch that off, because otherwise you're gonna slow down your machine. All right. We also need some movement across my planet, so I'm just going to put minus 0.4 and just put it in all directions. Minus 0.4 and minus 0.4, and give it a speed of 1%. It's really fast already. And 0.4. It doesn't really matter if it goes up or down. The X and the Z should be the same. So it's either minus or plus. Right, we got that one covered. Maybe this one should also have an animation speed. No, I have to go one level up. This one, and it's very slow animation speed of 1. Maybe it will loop in 20 seconds, so it's a full cycle of 1 cycle of 20 and 2 cycles of 10. And this is what we have. Now, what we can do is use this one, the color. If I click on it and multiply that black and white image that I've made here, and actually multiply it with red, and yeah, let's see, and I can actually, if I'm still on the top level, I can actually copy this and paste it in the bump map. And just turn it down to 8% bump, and it will actually bump the whites and push down the darker grays and the blacks. Right, so this is our first, oh, I already got it on the sphere. This is our first texture, and it looks kind of like this. Got lots of blacks in there because of the black seams, the grout in my lines, the tile section of it, and I'm just going to make a copy of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on the alpha and paste the texture in here as well. And then I'm going to change the color in the section of color, the multiplier, and just should I desaturate it? Maybe a little. It looks like a green now. So let's make this a yellow, and I'll copy it again. And I'll make this one more on the orange spheres, like that. So I got a little bit different, and these last two obviously have an alpha channel. Now let's see. In here, I'm just gonna switch these. Going into the distorter, into the tiles. I'm just going to change that grout into gray so that it's not completely black. And the rest of it, I'm just going to attach it to my sphere. And what I can do next is actually pump up the vertical length of my 2 texture tags like this, and there I can actually give them an offset, see where they go, see where the bands are basically mashing together. Maybe this one should be even bigger, like that. And final result. It's a little crispier than my previous version. I think I've cranked up the distortion quite a bit. And of course I made the bandwidth a lot more than it was previously, so basically the V length. Looks kind of neat, looks different from the original, probably has to do with lots of blurry effects, but this will give you enough to experiment with. And let's see, probably this was 40 is way too much, maybe it's just 20. And of course you can actually make separate settings for separate materials. So maybe here I'll even do as low as 10. Still gonna be a little bit scraggly. But it gives you enough to play around with. Now, if you render a short sequence of, say, 50 frames, then you can actually tell what the speed of the motion is going to be. The bands are going to be moving across the surface, and the actual fractal of the noise is going to change. Slightly less for the big waves that are in the bands themselves, and slightly more in the actual cloudiness of the bands. Now, last thing, of course, is put an infinite light on it, and once you put an infinite light on it, copy it and just roll it around 180 so you get a little bit of that backlight, not too much, a little bit of that backlight, and you get this, well, I like it. It's pretty. Gas giant planet in Cinema 4D. Okay, tell me what you find are better settings, because they're bound to be better settings than this. I just didn't want to bother with finding out.